Last week, I did a poll on my community tab here on YouTube to see what you guys thought I should do. Either a 10-hour impression of God of War Ragnarok or a 10-hour impression of Tactics Ogre Reborn. I kind of want to play both, so in the end, I decided I'm just going to do both of them. We're going to do Ragnarok today, and then Friday, we're going to do Tactics Ogre. So let's start by talking about God of War Ragnarok and my thoughts on my first 10 hours with the game. I do need to add one thing here. I like to play games on the hardest difficulty. I like the challenge because I'm a bit of a masochist. So yeah, I'm playing on Call Me God of War difficulty, and I think it helps with figuring out like what is actually like unbalanced within the game, or what characters kind of fucking suck, or enemies kind of suck to fight. And I have found some stuff in the game that I'm not a huge fan of. Let's talk about what I don't like about God of War Ragnarok. I don't like the upgrading or the regular gear menu UI. The camera feels pretty wonky at times, and the tracking on the targeting focus or the lock-on feature, it isn't all that great. For me, the gear UI just feels cluttered. Yeah, it's organized and mostly readable, but there's a lot going on in it, and for me, it just feels like there needs to be some empty space to streamline it and just make it feel not as cluttered. I also think there's a lot of information that's kind of unnecessary. It just feels unnecessary. I don't need to see how many upgrades a thing has or the little flavor text that everything has in the center of the screen. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not necessary and just fills the space too much. Just tell me how much stuff I need to upgrade and what those upgrades are going to do. And that's all I really need to know. There's also the problems I have with the camera and the tracking mechanic, but those are kind of the same thing and they kind of just work together. Maybe it's just because I don't use controllers all that often anymore, but I always find the camera becomes angled upward as I'm locked onto an enemy. I could maybe be hitting the right stick on accident because I do have kind of slightly big hands, not like humongous hand, but slightly big. So I could be hitting it accidentally and not knowing it, but I think it stems from a bigger problem, the tracking mechanic or the lock-on mechanic. The lock-on and the tracking of the lock-on is really slow and it breaks all the time for me. If something moves very fast across the screen and you're locked onto it, then it breaks. If something you're locked onto flies past you as you dodge to the side, tracking mechanic breaks or the lock-on breaks. I've started to focus on not using it because it feels not that great to use. Like, it's not fully useless and it's good for certain enemies, but with how finicky it can be, I don't want to use it and have it mess me up anymore when I'm trying to get a dodge in or trying to get away from an enemy, but it keeps flicking me or I keep hitting the stick just slightly and it flicks me to a different guy. I don't want that, so I've kind of just stopped using the lock-on unless it is a large boss or just a boss in general. Is there anything that I found questionable with God of War Ragnarok so far? Within the first 10 hours, because of how large I think the game is and how little I think I've gotten into it, I can't say for certain, but within those first 10 hours, I would say no. There's nothing that I've sat there and like scratched my head about and just questioned and wondering why it's there or why something got removed. So what's good about God of War Ragnarok? Basically everything, but I'm going to keep it to three main things that I love about God of War Ragnarok: the pacing, the story, and the combat. Let's start off by talking about the pacing of the game. I love the game's pacing because it lets you explore at your own pace, but the areas aren't large enough for you to get lost for hours like normal open world games. And there aren't that many side quests to be like, oh, here, and just fill up your screen. It feels much more like large levels than an actual open world, with the introduction of every world so far being mostly linear so that it introduces you to the level's enemies and its different mechanics, but it then opens up into a larger area that can be explored for treasure and side quests. This builds the game up to nudge you in the direction of the story, but it doesn't force you to do some dumb grind of side quests to unlock the next area and allows you to do them at your own pace as you want. It gives you the freedom to explore the surrounding area as you wish. I also really like the change of pace that the Atreus sections bring to the game. Being quicker and with better ranged attacks is kind of fun and an interesting change of pace from the rest of the game as Kratos. I also love the story so far. I don't want to talk much about it because I am only in Alfheim, but I'm looking forward to continuing the game and learning more about this story and seeing how they use the mythology of the Norse from this point on with Ragnarok, and I just want to see how the story is going to progress. It's also very interesting to see how the worlds you went to in the first game changed because of what happened there or what you did there. Like Alfheim going from this hive type world to a beautiful temple that's kind of overgrown with lusciousness. It feels like the world is evolving and living. Finally, let's talk about combat. Combat has such a good weight to it in God of War Ragnarok. Using the Leviathan axe feels heavy and hard-hitting, while the Blades of Chaos are quick and do damage over a large area and are good for taking out a bunch of foes around you. And learning to incorporate the skills you've unlocked into your combos along with your runic powers changes up combat and makes it a lot more fluid and a lot of fun. I've learned that the game's combat is more about timing than just beating things up or button mashing. It's better to block and parry and then counterattack than to dodge out of the way unless it's a special attack that will break your block, because you will be out of position and open to a follow-up attack from behind if you do dodge, because most of the enemies have a 2 or 3 attack combo. And with combat, especially in this game, it is always the little mistakes that get you killed. And I should know, because I have been killed a lot. I don't know how many deaths I have, but I have a good amount. I think that God of War Ragnarok is fantastic. It is one of the Game of the Year contenders. Yes, there are things I don't like about it, but there's more that I do like about the game than I don't. The combat and story are great, and the pacing of the game feels fantastic. And it's one of those games that I really want to play all the way through and finish. I don't want to just stop like some of the other games I've done on here for a 10-hour impression. And with all that being said, that brings us to the end of this 10-hour impression of God of War Ragnarok. At the end of the week, I'll be putting out another 10-hour impression on Tactics Ogre Reborn, so look forward to that. And here's a playlist of my 10-hour impressions and my previous 10-hour impression of Entropy Center. Also, don't forget, if you did like this video and you watched it all the way through, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button,